Welcome to ReSounding, a podcast exploring the power of the arts in advocacy and in action. We talk with artists and activists, taking a deep dive into questions surrounding the causes of displacement, the strength and the vulnerability of people on the move, and the potential of the arts to shine a light on social injustice and impact people's lives for the better. My name is Laura Hassler, and I welcome you to a special two-part episode of ReSounding. This year marks the 75th World Human Rights Day, a day for attending to global justice and equality for all. In this roundtable, we welcome back two friends and ARC27 collaborators, both of whom are striving for greater justice for undocumented, refugee, and migrant people in the Netherlands. We welcome Godfrey Lado and Yigit Aksakoglu. Very, very glad today to have a slightly different format than normally. Instead of an interview with one guest, we will be in conversation with two very, very interesting people. And I think the three of us all have something in common, which is that each of us, for different reasons, left our countries of origin and ended up in the Netherlands. And I'll say something about that in a minute because the Netherlands is a very interesting environment. And each of us has a very strong, you might say, primary identity linked to the arts and to creative expression, but also to building community. So I think we find each other in those spaces. And I'll say something about our two guests first. We're speaking with Yigit. Yigit is based in The Hague. He has established Mahala Art and Culture, which is an organization that provides solutions for employment of artists with a refugee, asylum seeker, paperless, and or exile background who are looking for ways to be artists here. It was founded in 2022. Yigit is a social change advocate, and his career spans human rights advocacy, early childhood development, NGO policy, and even political imprisonment. And our other guest is Godfrey Lado. Over the last 30 years, Godfrey works with the ASKV, support place for refugees in the Netherlands. This organization has supported undocumented refugees by providing shelter, legal and social assistance, daytime activities, and vocational training. And he has been a vocal advocate for refugee rights, both locally and nationally within the Netherlands. Both of our guests are also artists, musicians, poets. And what I haven't said is where each of us comes from. I arrived here many years ago, coming from the United States, from New York, but from kind of an international social change community background and peace movement background. So, Yigit, do you want to say something more about yourself, your background, your story?
Well, very shortly, thank you very much again for having me on this program. It's becoming a part of my weekly habit to check what's going on at ARC27 and on the ReSounding. I'm originally from Turkey and originally studied civil engineering but never worked as an engineer. So now, yes, I'm in the Netherlands. I'm trying to do something for the refugees, asylum seekers and undocumented people, where I am also a refugee at the moment.
And Godfrey, can you tell us more about yourself?
Okay, Godfrey Lado came here as a refugee myself about 25 years ago. I'd have to say I kind of found myself or created myself artistically in the Netherlands. When I came here, I was a student, law student. The whole plan was studying law, becoming a lawyer or a judge or whatever in that spectrum. But I ended up asking for asylum, getting into the asylum procedures and system, and that took so long. And within that waiting period, I discovered the creative person in myself, which I knew I had because the whole family is creative. And that's the path I took. Also, being part of that asylum procedure, you get to do stuff that you don't normally do. Like, for example, I had to translate for people who could speak the languages I speak. And that is also something that today I do as profession. So when I say I kind of discovered myself in this country, that's what I meant, like coming here as a student with different aspirations, different dreams and plans, and then ending up doing what I'm doing today. I've been working for the last 5 years for ASKV, and ASKV is indeed an organization that has for the last 35 years catered for undocumented migrants. And they do that in Amsterdam with like legal support and like a lot of what Laura already said. My contribution to ASKV is my experience as a refugee myself.
As I remember, you were undocumented yourself for some
Definitely.
years.
In the process of asylum seeking, I was partly undocumented. That was like 3 years in the streets of Amsterdam. And like the experience I get to, imply right now to help those who are in the same situation. As far as my art is concerned, I found myself talking about South Sudan. That's where I come from, because I had to explain why I left my country. By doing that, I proclaimed myself the cultural ambassador of South Sudan. And I was telling the Sudanese story, the reason why Sudan is in a conflict. And that evolved into telling the story of the refugee in the Netherlands, and finally making that also part of my identity, speaking up for people who can speak up for themselves, something in line with what Yigit is doing as well. And with that, I baptized myself the Forgotten Stone. And the Forgotten Stone is my name for forgotten people, stories, ideologies, anything that's forgotten. For me, it's a mission to make it remembered. It's like every time I come on stage, tell people I'm the Forgotten Stone. When I get off stage, they tell me we'll never forget you, and that's the effect I'm looking for when I say the Forgotten Stone. So Godfrey Lado from South Sudan.
And Godfrey, there was one thing I just wanted to bring up that I remember when we spoke last, when you were telling your story. And I remember you telling a story about how for a long time you couldn't answer the questions of the Dutch immigration authorities about why you as an individual personally deserved to receive asylum here. And you said, because I couldn't think in terms of I.
Yes.
Because we think in terms of we.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't answer their question correctly. So I never got in such a beautiful cultural concept, which we need a lot more of in this country, I would say. And maybe that's a good segue just to say a little bit about what's happened in this country recently and the big political shift, because I know that many of our listeners are not based in the Netherlands and might not know this story. And that, I think, relates also to both of your work and to the people that whose voices you're trying to lift. And that story is, and I'm not a political expert at all. However, in the years that I've been in the Netherlands, I've seen a steady political and attitudinal shift to what you might describe as the right, to intolerance for people of other backgrounds, to, as we see in many countries, a kind of narrative that gets picked up by some politicians and media as well, which is basically blaming the other, whoever the other is at that point, for the frustrations of the Dutch population. I think this has been leveraged very much in the last years of a neoliberal regime, where the finger has been pointed very much at refugees who've come into the Netherlands. And even figures have been inflated about how many people have come by combining actual numbers of people who are actually arriving here as you could say political or social refugees. That's been made. They take numbers which also include people who come here for work or whatever to basically to scare people. And one of the politicians who has been the most vocal in his racism and intolerance has just won the largest number of seats in the Dutch parliament. And several other parties that tend in that direction have also gained. So there is now a majority in the Dutch parliament which is exceedingly hostile to newcomers and to the idea of newcomers. And I think that maybe it might be interesting just to ask both of you to say whether, to what extent you think this is impacting the people that you're working. Have you heard results of this? Are people feeling more anxious and scared? And how do you feel yourself about this? Yigit, can you maybe speak to this a little bit?
Yeah. So just to start with a lighter note, among our friends from Turkey who had to be in exile here, we joked saying that, fascism is following us, wherever we go, it's coming after us, type of a thing. It's scary, but as a good friend said, it was unavoidable. So it was expected, but the Dutch society in general didn't want to talk about it. And you put it in a nice way as intolerance, but the name of it, what's going on, is racism. We have
Absolutely.
A racism problem in the Netherlands, and it's not just based on color, it's mixed with Islamophobia. And we are unable to talk about it because as soon as we name it, the local Dutch people feel like as if we call them Nazis or themselves as racists. So structural, institutional racism is not discussed, and therefore it's rising. This is one. Two, most of my friends or some of my friends are in the process, all in the asylum process. And the process was already was taking much more time than before, and now it's a complete uncertainty. And there are reasons, or there is a reason why we come here, which is based on a trauma. But this waiting and uncertainty is creating another trauma in those people. And as you said, it's based on post-truth facts. No one is talking about facts. No one is talking about the real numbers. It's always a mess, and it's like huge and exaggerated and so on. Actually, there are only around 100,000 refugees in the Netherlands, and every year this number doesn't increase too much, like 10% much or 20% much maximum. As soon as the Ukrainian crisis appeared, Netherlands took 98,000 Ukrainian refugees, immediately gave them work permits and so on. So there was the capacity.
Of course.
Another thing, left in the Netherlands is not representative of the migrants, is not willing to do so, is not willing to engage with the migrants, refugees and so on. The representation of the people from different backgrounds is very low, especially in the left. And left is even scared of its own constituency to voice such issues. So I can easily say, maybe I'm wrong, there's no one who is pro-migration within the Dutch parliament, and therefore they are doomed to lose this debate because it's the migration debate, it's nothing else. And us, the migrants, we are not as much as collaborating as it is necessary. The organizations around migrants are led by white Dutch people, and those of us who could establish organizations are trying to focus our own constituency, let's say, our own communities, because the need is there and no one is willing to respond to the need because everyone has their own perspective and it's not the refugee perspective. So we also need to organize, collaborate, starting from ourselves, among ourselves, but also with the Dutch politics, and start to engage with the Dutch society and start talking about racism, but also what is a migration society, because the Netherlands is inevitably a migration society, as much as Germany is. So let's start talking about it. Let's build a migration society before we are too late, as we know from other examples from other countries, because they are following the same exact rule book of authoritarian regimes. No, they are banning. They start with banning organizations, freedom of expression, which we are already seeing, even with the.
We're already seeing this. Yes, we're already seeing signs of
exactly.
This. Yes.
So it's coming. It's at the gate. Either we organize now around the most vulnerable, around the most disadvantaged, or we all lose the battle altogether. This is what I think about the Dutch politics.
Very strongly and well said. Godfrey, do you agree with that, or do you have a different perspective on this?
I agree with a lot of what Yigit said, but I also have a take on the whole. The language we use to communicate, be it right-wing perspectives or ideals, or right or left-wing ideals, the language is bad. Straight bad. There's no other word I can use. The language is not good. When the left describes the right wing, it's like they are a bunch of evil people with 4 horns on their heads and 6 legs, and they are not human at all. So from when the left criticizes the right wing, they don't criticize them based on facts that are intelligent and disputing their own insecurities. And then the other way around, when the right also starts making their points, they base it on, again, dehumanizing or degrading. They use words that are chosen to have a certain effect on the public opinion. And then I'm thinking, like, is it not time we as the people address politicians on their political games? Like, it is about life, it is about us, it's about me and you, it's about real people. But then the political game is just too much.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's words matter. It's important, how people speak about each other, and it's important to open doors and to build alliances. And maybe that's also a good segue to, one of the questions that we wanted to talk about, which is, how do we do that? How do we reach out to other sectors of the society, and who are they? I was just watching a new film about Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was the man who was the chief strategist who worked with Martin Luther King. And Bayard organized actually that big march on Washington when King spoke his I Have a Dream speech, where I was as 15-year-old kid. Bayard was, and there's a new film out about him called Rustin. And very interesting to me was this kind of focus on his understanding of how the Black liberation movement, it was then called the Civil Rights Movement in the South of the United States, needed to reach out to religious communities, labor unions, the peace movement, educators, college students. And that's the way they built that coalition, that of people who then, and also by linking issues, by making clear that this is not only a question of exclusion of one group, this is a question of an economic system, this is a question of a political system, this is a question of how we live together in our communities, and that's all linked together. So I was very interested to think about that, and I think maybe that relates to our conversation now of how do we reach out as, a South Sudanese artist and activist, a Turkish exile. I don't refer to myself as American any longer, but that was a New Yorker who is still looking for broad communities and building on the idea of music and how music can connect people. But how do we build that power base? Because that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about we need to build a power base. And how do we do that? And I'm sure you both have ideas about that because you're both involved in putting down some basic building blocks for that.
You see, the word community itself, when you are in a community and you call it a community, it's supposed to be something or a place where it's connected to itself. Like the members of a community are supposed to have interactions with each other, are supposed to be related to each other in a way. For me, that's like how life should be. You, Laura, you, Ed, and I, we came from somebody. We've been given birth to that makes us living things, forever parts of other living things. We are a community by nature. We became so rich, let me say, not intelligent. We became so rich that we thought, okay, now we can also create a community of individuals. A community where everybody have what they need and don't need the other. That's the community that was asking me the questions that I could not answer.
Is that a community, Godfrey, or is that individuals, or is that a splintered society?
Good one. I call it a community of individuals, which is contradicting in itself, because a community cannot be individualistic.
Because it's about what we share, what we have in common, right? So how do we broaden that?
Where I come from, where Yigit come from, what we call collective societies, you get taught from the beginning how to live with your brother, with your sister, with your friends, with your uncles. It becomes part of you, that it's a natural thing to understand that you are not alone. You're never alone. You have that accommodation of other people inbuilt. And that's something that the modern societies are losing. It's very hard for us to give away our privacy once we become the modern people we are. And in it, there is a lot of conflict.
Yes, and we see also growing isolation, growing loneliness, rising rates of violence that seems to have no direct reason. So there are all kinds of signs that the individualistic society is breaking down or becomes destructive to its members. So is there a way that, thinking about the societies that both of you came from, I came from a highly individualistic society, but I grew up in an inclusive community of people who lived together and shared things. And there were a lot of artists there, and there were people who were activists, and, we took care of each other. So it was like a bubble, it was like a bubble within that. And people within that community worked in the wider community, but came back to that community for their sustenance, for their safety, I guess you could say. Well, so I'm wondering if maybe we're talking about something like that. Are we talking about building a base together of people from all of our different backgrounds, but who are brought together by this idea of a shared commons, of a shared community, and then reaching out to the broader society? Is that kind of a starting point?
I'm a little skeptical about the idea of community, I must say, because it can also be quite conservative and controlling if the community has some norms and you are out of these norms and so on and so forth. So I want to put a bit of suspicion into that part of it, yeah. But I think what Godfrey said was right. We come from collective societies because we did not have, in the European sense of the modern welfare state. So we had to take care of each other as siblings, as relatives, as neighbors, and so on, because there was no state filling up those spaces. Yeah, there was no social welfare mechanisms in place. But as you just discussed, it made people individualized because I don't need them anymore. It's between me and the state. But it's made me too dependent on the state then, no? Then that's what I see here now. Most of the Dutch friends I have are people who are in love with their state, no? Because they feel like most of the things they have is given to them by the state, actually. So there is not such an antagonistic relation between the citizen or the individual and the state, but it as if they are one. And as soon as we, as they call us, the newcomers comes into the picture, then we disturb this whole ideology. But I come from a tradition where everything is against the state. State is actually trying to invade our space, and we are trying to push it in a sense. No, in a maybe Gramscian way. It's an ongoing struggle with the state. It never ends. It never stops. And we are seeing as soon as the state has too much power, we now see how it intrudes all spaces, individual spaces, and so on. For me, the idea is not only in community building, it's of course very important in some senses, but it's in the politicization of the individuals. It's all about the politics and politics taking place in the public space. The lack of not seeing a single graffiti in a public space is showing me the lack of interest in politics in the people and how they want to follow the orders and the public order and this and that instead of expressing their ideas. No, so they prefer not to express it publicly in order to be in the community actually. So therefore, I think it is time for us to talk about politics and make politics not a boring subject. Because whenever I talk to my Dutch friends, Dutch politics, they yawn. No, it's not boring. They are soon gonna impact our lives very deeply, especially our lives. I still now after the elections, I'm not sure whether the asylum process will be the same or whether the new government will change it and make it more difficult for me and other refugees and asylum seekers. So it creates more uncertainty. So it affects my life. It should affect the life of other Dutch people, and therefore it's political. So therefore the solution is about politics and talking about it in the public space immediately now, and all of us maybe creating political communities, no? Because that's where I made most of my eccentric friends, I can say, in political action, like people whom I'm not able to meet on my normal daily life. I met them in political action, and I'm very happy to meet them because otherwise I wouldn't find them. This is the community I'm looking for. This is the community where I want to be part of, actually. Not a docile, domestic, and following the orders and state-loving community I want to be in, yeah?
Interesting, very interesting.
ReSounding is brought to you by the Art27 Network, a network of like-minded initiatives using art and culture to respond to the ongoing crisis of displacement of human beings in Europe and around the world. To find out more and to join our growing network, you can visit our website, art27.art, or follow us on Facebook at art27. This podcast was produced and edited by Ed Holland. The theme tune was written by Matteo Gallesi in collaboration with Sinker. Thank you for listening.